Yeah, it took 4 years to hand over the certificate. But you know, what we always say is, when it happens, we are ready in the future. And it happened today. I have a dream. I have had a dream. We all have a dream. What does the science look like in future? We don't really know. The only thing we know is, if we are not human-centric in the science, we will not make it. We are not robots. Nobody wants to be a robot. Nobody wants to be instrumental by somebody who has money. The only way to change looking at things is take responsibilities. Don't accept. Someone come over and say, how much do you cost? We gotta pay you that you lie. How much does it cost that you just join us to do a world you actually do not agree on? So, how do you constitute changes? Constitute changes is to go back and to realize that the roots of science is that people are curious. And we all want to make the world better. It's a long way to go. Now, looking at chemistry is particularly difficult. Why? Because we are suspicious people, aren't we? We go to the lab, we prepare something, we smell on something, we enjoy the property stuff, but everybody's afraid, how does it affect my life? So it takes, ground-shaking discoveries to convince people to change. Before that, I come back to my statement, it's all human-centric. Here it goes. Human-centric means there is a person, I call this the spike theory. You have particularly people who initiate something. And John is one of the persons I met, actually 7 years ago, where I thought, that's amazing. The way he started chemistry was, he never wanted to be a chemist. So I could ask, in the audience, who was in a similar situation? I'm sure, probably 50% or something. So what changed you? What changed your mind? Something happened to your life. Similar to John. So when John, and we heard this from the president, was 16, he wanted to be a rock star. He grew up in the Boston area and said, well, I'm gonna invent myself. And luckily, he had also buddies, friends. He joined, and we hear this sad story about his best friend who died of cancer at the age of 19. He was enrolled at the University of Massachusetts in Boston to study chemistry. John never considered this. But when this happened with James, he said, wait a minute, what could I do to, fight against these kind of things? It's not the only thing, but cancer always is this kind of big enemy, though. He said, molecularly, go into the science. So he enrolled at the University of Boston. This was at 1980. And he finished his master in 1984. Guess what happened? University of Boston, Massachusetts, good place. But there are other places that are more challenging, though. He moved to Princeton University. And it's a very particular places where people also consider, you had this refugee World War II damage from Europe. A lot of famous people went on to the United States, and at the time Princeton was, of course, a place to be in the sciences and also in chemistry. So he did his master and PhD at Princeton University. And guess what happened? He was not a chemist, rock star. Okay, that was a bit far. But then he decided, I'm going to look how the things will look like in the future. And we just had a conversation during lunch break. He realized that theoretical chemistry, what we know today, computations, nobody believes in that, even though the tools haven't been really invented there. So in Princeton, it's really hard to believe, but Princeton University 1985, 1987 or so, Nobody was doing this kind of technical conservation. Theoretical chemistry can be predictive. So he was interested in that. He thought, wait a minute, we could save a lot of time in avoiding waste if you're trying to mimic something in silico. He did it himself. And then big shots approached him and said, don't tell this anyone. I don't know how to calculate, but could you do me a favor and do calculation? So 2/3 of his papers coming out of this PhD work were based on collaborations he initiated, and he was this kind of amateur, theoretical amateur. And that's great. Don't believe in all these things which exist, just try to reinvent things or invent yourself. Okay. This wasn't enough for him because at that time, there was a big other topic coming up, which was then awarded many prizes, stuff like that. It's called molecular recognition. And he thought, what about to use that type of tool? Molecules recognize themselves and make a pattern. Why don't you, if you use that, and make new materials? So he called this non-covalent derivatization. And he had a card with this plate showing non-covalent derivatization on his card. So, and he said, it will be hard to develop that further in a university place. Let's do it, let's face the reality, go to the real practice. So he accepted a position at Polaroid Corporation in Cambridge. And at that time when he did this, in Cambridge, Polaroid, we all, some of the people in the audience know what that means, this very old-fashioned photograph thing. So you put this huge box, it came out of this kind of picture, and you had to wait for a while. Oh, that's me! But that picture, to develop that picture was not so easy, because you had to keep it in the fridge, all this stuff, because the layers, I don't want to go into details, but the silver-based photography was based on color, was based on predetermined layers of dyes. And if you do not avoid during the development process that some of these molecules, the small molecules, move around, you get very awful colors. So it could have been, if you're on a birthday party, the family in front of you make a picture of grandma. Grandma looked yellowish or green, whatever. So in order to avoid that, in many companies, Aqua and so on, have tried that. It was impossible by doing this with covalent chemistry. So he was the one who basically introduced the non-covalent strategy to stabilize the dye thing, and in order to develop the color that the grandma was just shining as she is. Okay, so he did a lot of good things there, and then he decided, okay, it's not enough room for further development, so he went back to academia. And academia at University of Boston, at University of Massachusetts, Boston, where he was a tenured full professor, but now it comes. 2 professorships. One in organic chemistry, the other one is in plastics engineering. You can imagine this is basically this kind of bridging thing he always been interested in. Okay, to cut a long story short, he got bored. Because, it's a very prestigious thing to be a professor, but you have been, surrounded by a lot of restrictions and things like that. Although you have a lot of freedom. He felt it's not getting developed fast enough. So he said, let's find a millionaire, let's find somebody who is interested in giving the money for a chemical investment. And so he met a gentleman named Babcock. And they had a conversation. Babcock was a very shy person though. He invited him for dinner, and they were sitting, and then they made a deal at the end of the dinner. He said, how much money do you want to step out from academia and to do something for the real world? He said, I guess $1 million bucks. That's pretty creative. Someday you will know. Polymer photochemistry. Hey, sun is shining, he's not shining. A lot of photochemistry is going on there. So, in terms of energy, conversion, all this kind of thing. Well ahead. And then, we live in a materials world, electronics, needs semiconducting metal oxides, and he's also in this. So, and then how do you bring all this together? Ask John, or go to his lectures. Visit the master course. It's also for older people. It's not only for the youngsters. So let's create a community where we have a regular meeting. We enjoy being, curious about this and not afraid of crossing borders. Yeah, what else to say? I forgot to mention, we received prizes. 2004, very funny one. He was #1 as an influencer. By the way, influencer hasn't been, this is much earlier. So, like him. He has been, he received the presidential award, okay, of a president of the United States you don't really want to remember. But it was like this, right? George W. Bush invited him to Oval Office and listened to you. Well, it didn't help much, I have to say, perhaps, but at least this is something which nobody else got so easily. So for excellence in science mentoring. And in 2012, there is a search committee, big shots, looking around who's influencer. He was one of the 25th visionary champions in the world. And now we come to the more basic things, the scientific aspects. He received the Perkin Medal. The Perkin Medal is from the Industrial Chemical Society of the United States, which is a pretty large society. So he received that in 2014. And what we heard just last week at the European Chemical Society conference, together with Paul Anastas, he received the August Wilhelm Hoffmann Memorial Award. I have to say, I had the pleasure to give the validation for this, and I should repeat that the evening before, I was, we had the conference dinner, and I'm a person like, I can't get enough. So they kicked everybody out from the conference place, and so I went to the hotel bar, just looking out who's there and so on, talking. So I had, good conversations with colleagues and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, before, everybody was left, I looked at my left and said, wait a minute, August Wilhelm Hoffmann was sitting next to me. And he was asking what's going on in the German Chemical Society. I said, don't worry, we have a plan. Well, other people said, you had too much whiskey. I can assure you, this was real. Okay, I should come to an end. He is not only booked in our place as a professor, honorary professor. By the way, for all the youngsters, honorary professor doesn't mean he gets any single money from it. It's just the honor. So we are very idealistic, human-centric. He has also a professorship at Monash University. Is there a distinguished professor of green chemistry, and in 2020 also in the Bath University in the United Kingdom, a global sustainable chair. And now, John, I think it's enough. I should